So, first thing I want to get to before we get into our scripture set, which we're going to be in Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 43. I want to look at another Easter egg, if you will, that God put in the Bible that I just thought is so neat. Maybe I've told some of you guys about this, but I just want to go over this real quick. If you go with me to the book of Joshua, it is the book right after the Torah, right? The Torah being the first 5 books of the Bible, the first 5 books of Moses, right? The Torah in Hebrew translates to the law, right? This is where we get all the 10 Commandments. This is where we get the Levitical laws. This is where we get the all the old Jewish laws come from the Torah. And the book immediately following the Torah is the book of Joshua, which in Hebrew, if you take the word Joshua, it translates to Yeshua. And Yeshua, if you translate it to English, is Jesus. Did you guys know that? The very first book after the law is the book of, we could call it the book of Jesus, right? So cool. And if you go with me to Joshua chapter 2, verse 21, you guys may know the story of Rahab the harlot, right? The spies from Israel came to Jericho, and they're camping out. And Rahab takes them in, and she kind of hides them away from the soldiers at Jericho. And then she says, well, I want my family to be okay, right? Because Rahab's a harlot, right? And that's not a very honorable job. Chances are she's separated from her family. Chances are that she hasn't talked to her family in a very long time because she has a very shameful occupation. And these guys come in, and they're hiding from the soldiers of Jericho, and she says, I want my family to be okay. And they say, okay, cool beans, here's what you do. You hang this scarlet cord from your window, and you'll be fine, right? God will protect you. And you bring in your family, you hide them in here, and God's going to protect you, right? Scarlet cord. Well, let's read it. And in verse 21, just one verse, then she said, according to your word, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet cord in the window. So first, right off the bat, scarlet cord, right? Well, youth group knows this in Revelation. Guys, I need you to help me out here. What is the army of God in Revelation? Or, I'm sorry, what is the uniform of the army of God? White robes, right? White robes, and how, way to go, and how do they get white, right? Because they're white and they're pure and they're clean, and they get that way through the blood of the Lamb, right? And so now we have a depiction here of a scarlet cord, a white cord dipped in the blood, right? And she's hanging it from her window. So I want you guys to picture this. You have a window here. Imagine this is the other way. Imagine this is a rectangle, and she hangs a scarlet cord above that, and it comes down. What is that going to make? What picture does that make? A cross. You got it. And while the whole walls of Jericho are falling around, while the whole world is falling all around her, because they have chosen to go their way and not God's way, she, along with her family that she hasn't talked to maybe in who knows how long, it doesn't say, right? But she and her family are protected while the cross comes down. Or, I'm sorry, while the walls come down and the cross stays up, right? And that's just so cool that this little thing is put in here for us to know, for God to kind of say, here's me, right? But a lot of times we kind of just skip over that. A lot of times we don't see that. If you read on in the book of Joshua on your own time, it talks about, it's basically the story of Israel coming across the Jordan into the land of Israel, right? And kind of a form of what? Kind of a form of baptism, right? How the people go across the water, go into the water, and then are made holy. So just a cool thing how God shows up. And God showed up for Rahab, and he's going to show up for another woman several thousands of years later. And by the way, Rahab, again, not the most prideful position, but did you guys know that she was an ancestor? She became an ancestor of Jesus, right? It was through her line, right? God used her. God used her. She was probably thinking, nobody like me, but God used her in a mighty way. And God's going to use another woman in a mighty way in our text. So if you go with me, chapter 5, verse 21. And we'll get right into it. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat, crossed over, what did Joshua do with Israel? He crossed over, right? So cool. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. So people following Jesus. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus, I'm going